Welcome to the Fresh Vending podcast, where we discuss how smart vending machines are revolutionizing fresh food accessibility for both creators and consumers. I'm Isaac Wu.
I'm Nathan Downs.
And today we're going to talk about how to get started in smart vending. So last time we talked about what smart vending is, and today we're maybe going to help some people get into it. Let's talk about where these things can be opened in. So like, could I, if I'm a fresh food operator, could I just open up in any high traffic building and just like start seeing huge revenues, or how does that work?
Yeah, you're not guaranteed to make your Lamborghini payment the first month. I think that we look at it as a micro store, because essentially what it is you're taking whatever your current food operation is or whatever you're about to open, and you're shrinking it down. So do you get to remove some hats, the 35 hats that you have to wear as a restaurateur or food service operator? Absolutely. You're not worried about your dishwasher calling in, or your cashier, the air conditioning went out. But you still have to wear plenty of hats to be successful. You have to be a great operator. You have to be, somebody that has good products. You have to be a good listener and understand what do these people in this building want. That's kind of within your brand experience, right? For the offering. So that's the half that you can control, after you get opened. The other half that you can control is you have to do, just like opening a new restaurant, a lot of homework. You want to set yourself up for success. So one of the things that we see commonly is people will get really excited and say, my cousin just moved into this brand new condo, and there are 100 condo units, and it's like the coolest, most modern space ever. This would look amazing in the lobby. And, you got to dig a little bit deeper. Will it look amazing in the lobby? Yeah. Somebody walks in and there's smart vending there. It's exciting. But, maybe they're 4 or 5 months into it and they realize that, throughout the year, there's, 15 people in those units are gone for a month. And maybe there's another 10 units where only one person lives there. And they say, well, we're open to the public. But the reality is that the public that comes in there is the Amazon and UPS drivers 10 times a day, right? So it's like you have this emotional kind of reaction and excitement about it being successful in the building. And then without doing your homework, you realize ultimately that, man, there's an amazing cafe a block away that people like to go to, and they kind of like that experience. And before you know it, answers that you could have had before you opened, you don't have those answers and you don't have that insight, and you realize that, on an average day, it's a fraction of the opportunity that you thought you had in that space.
Yeah. And we'll talk about each of these, kind of choosing a location, reviewing it after a month in detail later on. But just to kind of give a general roadmap, I think maybe the first question you want to ask yourself is opening a micro store right for my business in general, right? Like, what do you want to accomplish? Are you trying to make this your new profit puppy? Well, that's going to look a little bit different than I want to have some sort of physical manifestation because I'm an online brand and I think it would just be good for customer acquisition. Like, those are two different roadmaps, right? And so the first question you want to ask is this right for me? What are my goals, right? And then generally the next step would be choosing a company to go with. There are a few companies that maybe we'll talk about later, but and they each offer kind of different value propositions, right? And so once you figure that out, then comes choosing the location. Okay, where, again, this is according to your goals. Where should I open up? How many should I open up? Mm-hmm. Hopefully the company provides you with some resources. Like we have a podcast, other companies have blogs or academies on how to open your first micro store, what research to do, how to kind of look back and say, is this working or is this not? How do I need to change it? Do I need to move it to another location? Do I need to stock the fridge differently, et cetera? And I guess each company does a little different, but hopefully the company you go with can help you through this process of choosing your product offering, deciding, to launch in a specific spot, looking back, reading your dashboard and seeing what the consumer behavior is all about, maybe making some tweaks after that. And then if it's successful, maybe opening up another one in a similar location or pivoting. So that's kind of a general roadmap. Anything to speak to that? Launching a micro store roadmap?
Sure. I think that the concept that I've heard most often in different companies that has to do with whole product. So whole product is really just thinking about all the things that you need to be successful. And the analogy that I like to use is talking about the stationary exercise bike company Peloton. And what Peloton does that's really smart is they give you all of the individual pieces that you need to have an amazing experience. Now, is an amazing experience building up sweat and riding your bike? Technically, it looks like that. But in reality, what it is that when you get on that bike and it has the big screen on it and it's connected to the internet, you get to select from 1,000 different trainers around the world. You get to have their class whenever you want it. So if you wake up at 3 a.m. and you want to exercise, you can do that with the trainer that you want. And what Peloton does is they give you the bike, they give you the screen so that you can, physically connect. There's, the shoes that go with it, and the water bottle clicks in the perfect spot. And there's, the 8-pound weights that you need that are perfectly positioned so that you can do the upper body and all these different things. That it's about getting exercise, but it's more so about the relationship with you and that trainer that brings you to your happy place when you're doing that, right? So it's bringing everything to the table so that the relationship can have the minimum amount of friction. And it's very similar when you look at smart vending. What companies out there, what smart vending platforms that you want to work with because it feels like it's aligned with your concept. Dig deeper and say, what do they bring to the table for whole product so that I have the information, the resources, the insight, so that I'm not spending 6 months trying to figure this out on my own. They really kind of handhold and give you best practices and kind of coach you along the way to being successful. Or even better is if they share information with you that ultimately leads you to the decision that that's not the best company for you to work with.
Yeah. And that attentive customer service part is so important. I mean, you see Peloton, they're not shipping with UPS and having a guy say, oh, good luck. They're driving around their own vans. They come in, they set up the bike for you. They say, okay, sit on it, measurements, everything. So with the smart vending concept, there's so many moving parts. People, don't know about looking at face value. It's like, okay, it's a fridge, but what about the power that connects it? What about if you're using RFID? What about the stickers? Where do those come from? Who's going to train me on how to operate this camera sensor? How do I plug in the fridge? How do I use my dashboard? All of these things. I mean, this is a newish space, and people need training. And having a customer service team that's dedicated, a repairs team that's dedicated. Oh, what about transactions? Like, how am I going to get paid? All of these things need to be considered. But when you're choosing a smart vending company,
yeah, I think the telltale sign in my experience is when a company proactively feeds you all of these different variables and kind of proactively answers your questions. That some of them you already had in your notebook, and then some of them you kind of think to yourself, "Oh yeah, that makes total sense. That sounds like a good thing to kind of hold my hand, anticipate, educate me." That's when you really know when you're being proactively fed all the information. And use everybody has their spider sense for when there may be some fluffy talk. So one of the things that you want to look at the data. Who are they currently working with? Learn about as much as you can, just like you would opening up a new location, so that when you do, you're successful. And then once you have that formula right, rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And who's on the team, right? Do these guys even understand the food service industry? Right? Yeah. Like that's so important when you're choosing to work with someone.
There's two sides to it, right? There's the food people and there's the technology people.
Yeah.
And they're both extremely important, but depending on, I know the food tech companies that I've worked in, they've had food leaders and they've had technology leaders, and quite often the technology leaders have a much louder voice in the decision-making process, and sometimes that's amazing and sometimes it's not. That often can be a great experience for the consumer, but not really take the challenges of being an operator into account.
That's an interesting concept. Why do you think the technology people have a louder voice than the food people?
Well, I think food is interesting. Like, food is one of those things that everybody is familiar with it. It's ubiquitous.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks they know food and they do know food. But I think a lot of times the analogy or joke that I always use is, you can sit down on a spreadsheet and say 10x the food when in the manufacturing plant, but that's just not the way it works, right? Yeah. So anybody that's worked in food production, food manufacturing, there's just so many variables that you can't anticipate when you kind of get in the weeds with it. That it doesn't. They're just two different languages, technology and food. They're very different, and it's important to make sure that when you're getting in with a smart vending platform, that there's people that are fluent in both of those languages, and also helping you anticipate some of the challenges and hurdles.
That's so funny that you mentioned that. Everyone thinks they know what food is.
Yeah.
Because I went surfing yesterday with a friend that pretty much I could call my surfing mentor. I mean, at the beginning, he would tell me all these things like, oh, when you ride a shorter board, there's less board that gets in the way. Or as you surf more, you'll have more time on the wave. Or things like set your fins. All these things he said, they never really clicked. But yesterday, I had one of the best sessions of my life in Pacifica, and I surfed with this friend, and I understood all that day, yesterday, I started understanding everything that he had once told me. And so it's kind of interesting because people say oh, I surf, right? And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Do you have a video or whatever? And first of all, if they have a video, they probably don't surf because people that actually surf don't care to take a video of themselves. But sometimes people say I surf, and I see them, they're riding half a foot wave in Morocco on this 20-foot board or something. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But then my friend who doesn't say he surfs and kind of is sheepish about it, he knows his stuff. He's out there shredding and turning and all these things. It's kind of interesting. So this familiarity aspect is huge.
Did you tell him that you had this grasshopper moment with them?
Oh my gosh, yeah, and he was honored.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, that's it. I think there's something about speaking the same language and getting those aha moments faster. And I know for me, in my career, it's talking to somebody that's a seasoned food service veteran. It matters. You just not only that, but they tend to be much more direct personalities because they've kind of been in the trenches before. So those are some of the things that I think when companies are looking at, hey, I'm a pizza company and there's this, pizza smart vending machine, but there's probably 12 companies that are doing this in the US right now, and picking out which one is best. Those are just some of the things that you want to be aware of, and just trust your intuition. When you find the right smart vending platform for your business, it should just be firing on all cylinders, and it should feel good all the way around, as a partnership. And then I think the other piece that was a big meaty question that you asked before. I think you touched a little bit on having to do with the return on the investment.
Yeah.
And you mentioned what we had discussed before about if you're an online brand. Well, if you're an online brand, a lot of times I talk to these brands and they say, you know what? I don't even care if my smart vending location breaks even. If I can get more product in more people's hands, and then, there's kind of a ripple effect to online orders and just brand awareness, then that's a win for me. If I make money on it, great. Yeah. And I've heard founders and CEOs from these brands say that, pretty much verbatim. And that's interesting, right? Because you look at it and say, okay, so that's one potential win for them. When it comes to hospitals and universities, I've heard them say it's, yeah, sure, we want to make money, but more so, it's just about accessibility. Because that student, that nurse, we don't want them feeling like they don't matter as much as the people that are, up and about at different hours of the day. You really want to have this kind of equality for fresh food accessibility. So that's another piece that that can be the paramount kind of driver behind getting a fridge. And then, tertiary, most all people want to make money though, right? That's kind of where it's at. And understanding what does that look like? How much can I actually make with this fridge? And this, smoothie machine and this, pizza machine, whatever it may be. How much can I make, and what are your other clients doing? And really get into kind of the data and understanding your location and things like that.
Yeah. So speaking of location, regardless of what company you choose, you're going to have to research locations and choose this place to launch. So maybe we can talk about how to choose a good location.
We were talking about that. The example earlier was the condo, right? But when you're looking at locations, we were talking about homework and really digging in and understanding not only who are the people in the building, how many hours a day are they there. 24 hours is great, but you can also make a great business within a building that's only open for 8 hours. You also want to look at the competition locally, right? Like, is there that, cafe around the corner, or are you in a food desert where you kind of have a command audience? Do you have the ability to communicate opening your store to the people that are in that area? It's great if you're in a food desert, but if you can't effectively, communicate it to the people in that desert, then it may not be a successful venture in that regard.
Yeah, or if you're pricing people out because you're just not that kind of brand.
Totally. The cold pressed juice at $6 could, go gangbusters in one building and, be crickets for sales in another building. So it's getting to know, the volume of people, but also the consumers. And there's nothing, there's creative little ways that you can come up with, learning these things. So one thing is you could actually just go in and just ask people and just say, hey, I'm thinking about opening up this little micro cafe thing in there. What are the two things that you wish you had access every day as far as fresh food goes, if it was right there in that spot? Mm-hmm. And 9 times out of 10, if you're asking people's opinions and you're asking for 15 seconds of their time, they're going to answer you, and that's free intel. You could go to the local convenience store around the corner and say, what are the 5 best-selling items in this convenience store? There's things that you can do, lots of things like that, where you can do free homework and really get to know the demographic in the building, in the area. Just go out, get out there and speak to people, have those interactions just like you would have those interactions with your customers in a restaurant. It's about the relationships, building on that, and then giving the people what they want.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to diminish the invitation to go out and ask people, but also you can just ask people at your own counter. It's like, hey, where do you hang out usually? Or where do you work? And you can think, okay, well, if a ton of people work on this street, then maybe I should open a micro store there. Or like, where would you like to see me next, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. That can definitely drive it. I mean, if you can continue to learn, from your existing community, that's great. But the bottom line is that you want to get a lot of information from different, sources, and then sit down and kind of have that help steer your decision.
And when you decide and you choose a place, there's going to be a lot of the times the building is going to ask you to pay up. Not always, but some of the time. And I think one thing that we've talked about in the past is that it should be the other way around, because they should be paying you an amenity fee because you're improving the lives of those people in that building, right? So you become the amenity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, but in fairness to, like, if I'm a building manager and historically, we say, hey, we're going to put a Coca-Cola machine in there, and, we're going to give you $100 a month to have our Coca-Cola machine there. That sounds realistic. And that would be my orientation going in. I don't know anybody that would consider a Coca-Cola machine an amenity, but there's certain people that Coca-Cola is delicious. I'm never going to argue that. So I'm sure there's certain people that love having the convenience of it there, but it's a game changer. As an amenity, it's something that is unique, right? That not everybody has. And if you were to go to the 3 closest hospitals, the 3 closest condos, they're not going to have, this 24-hour smart vending service there. They're just not going to have it. So it's something that you have to frame up the conversation when you approach the decision maker in the building and say, hey, listen, we're thinking about bringing in this amenity. And, it's even better when you can get them to pay an amenity fee, because, truth be told, it's great to sell a $10 Caesar salad instead of a $2 Snickers bar, but you also have more risk, right? So if your Caesar salads aren't selling fast enough and you have to waste a few of them, well, there's much more risk on your part. So you really want to kind of come at it from an angle of partnering with them on fresh food accessibility for the people in their building, that it's their responsibility to take care of and nourish that community. And when you kind of strap on that mentality and utilize that approach. It's all based in partnership. And, some companies, I've seen companies have a $200 a month amenity fee. I've seen companies have $1,000 a month amenity fee. And even if you, put a couple $100s in your pocket a month as an amenity fee, that goes a long way in smart vending because you've already cut out the retail, labor.
Yeah. I think that gives a pretty good summary of, how to choose a location.
Mm-hmm.
But who's the point person that people should talk to in terms of, like, you said building manager? Is that kind of the person that a food operator would sell to who's trying to open a micro store?
Yeah, you want to do your research. So if you were looking at, going into a hospital, typically it's somebody that would be at a director level of nutrition or culinary. Sometimes you can get in through the IT person.
Really?
Yeah, because a lot of times IT people, it's kind of their job to know about technology, just like it's the job of the, food directors to know about, fresh food and accessibility. So also, usually at a director level, the person tends to be a little bit more approachable.
Yeah.
And their calendar isn't so crazy that they kind of have to be thinking about the highest level issues in the organization. And then if and it's the same thing at a university. And if you switch gears over to like offices, for example, you could have an office with 150 people, and it may be in your best interest just to go in and drop off a sample of, what you want to bring to them, to the person that's the office manager. And they're usually very approachable, especially when you have free food in your hand.
Yeah.
Or if it's a larger, campus, whatever it may be, usually they have some sort of facilities people. And again, like director level is usually a great place to start.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like trying to open like a counter or brick and mortar in one of these buildings. It's, you give them a sample, you pitch them, but this time it's like, I don't need a whole brick and mortar. I just need 3x3.
Right. You could do, I mean, in some of these, some smart vending is very substantial. Like it requires, plumbing and floor sinks and, 220 electrical and Ethernet and those things. Those are, significant expenses when you think about, how much the actual unit itself costs. So things like that are more of a long game.
Yeah.
If you're putting in some of the smoothie companies I know, the coffee companies I know, some of the pizza companies require that more substantial infrastructure to go in. That's a longer play. But if you have, something that's, if you're literally just plugging in a unit that you can move easily, you could also say, hey, let's do a pilot for a month, with these organizations. So again, it's, you can really mitigate the risk for them to say, come in for a month, we'll try out this smart vending thing and see if you like it or not. And it's a win-win too, because when do you ever get to try out a restaurant location for a month and see how much you like it, right?
Yeah.
And if for some reason you get in and they love you and, you don't love them, then you can say, thank you very much. It's been good. You unplug and you haven't wasted all of your money and you're not locked into some, long-term lease agreement.
You can move it somewhere else.
Unplug it, take it somewhere else, plug it back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about business models for someone that's operating a micro store? Where does, what are the costs like? What are the revenues like?
The variables are so huge. So if you're, and I keep using the same examples, if you're selling a $2 cup of coffee versus a $9 pizza or a, $13 tuna niçoise salad, it can really go in a lot of directions. And for those reasons, it's another great, when we talked about whole product, it's another great example of when you're looking at a smart vending platform, if they can't answer those questions and walk you through in terms that, like, using words that you easily understand, that may be indicative of how they're going to be long-term in the partnership. I've seen many, many operators buy smart vending units, and it's like they bought a toaster. And it's like, there's your toaster. We sell toasters. You bought your toaster. Good luck with your toaster. And that most of the time works fine for a toaster. But very rarely does that play out well with smart vending because of the complexity. Some aspects are very intuitive, and other aspects, it can take 6 or 8 months to learn. So there's one other trend that I thought was really interesting or worth at least mentioning is I've heard this many, many dozens of times where operators will have this moment where the light bulb goes off and they say, well, wouldn't it be cool if we had this food court and there's the pizza machine and there's the smoothie robot and there's the smart fridge and there's the coffee machine, and you essentially have this zero, retail labor food court concept that has all of these different smart vending technologies come together. And it's something that's really interesting, and it's actually happening in pockets all over the country right now. So, I've always loved seeing them and getting a feel for if there's different smart vending technologies that kind of shine, and kind of how they complement each other in reality. Because in my head, it sounds great. But it's very interesting to see and compare user experiences at one time across smart vending technologies.
Yeah, the world is smart vending's oyster, I think, at this point. It's so new, and every time we introduce it to someone, they come up with a new idea that we haven't heard of. And so this has been a really fun episode, how to get started in smart vending, because hopefully our listeners have thought of some cool ideas and they can put it in the comments or something and reach out to us, because again, this is a new space and it's growing fast. So thanks for listening to this one.
Till next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the show this week. If you're interested in learning more about smart vending platforms, you can visit us at launchfoodspot.com. I'm Nathan Downs, and you've been listening to the Fresh Vending Podcast.